What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at Nobody, directed by Elia Nasiller, written by Derek Colston of John Wick fame, and starring Bob Odenkirk of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad fame. Nobody tells the story of Hutch Menzel, who is this everyday guy going through everyday mundane life activities. He has a typical relationship with his family, in which his kids are not really attached to him. He and his wife are very distant from one another, and he just gets pushed around and he just gets pushed around and belittled almost all the time. Until one evening, his house gets broken into, his daughter's Kitty Cat's bracelet gets stolen, and Hutch hits his breaking point and just goes on a trail to find the bracelet. All the while getting mixed up with the wrong people. So yeah, that is the overall story of Nobody. So let's make this review as short and sweet as possible. End of the day, I thought Nobody was great. This is a fun action movie. It's done in the same vein as John Wick in terms of its story and structure. I don't think this movie is visually interesting as John Wick, nor do I think the story of this movie is as fascinating or comic booky like John Wick. But for what Nobody has to offer and for what it is, it fits the overall story, and it fits the overall tone of this movie, I should say. And it's backed by a very grounded and awesome performance by Bob Odenkirk. I have been pushing for a long time for Odenkirk to make his transition into theatrical films, because I think he's too good to be just relegated to just TV roles. And this is somebody who loves Breaking Bad and loves Better Call Saul. So when I found out that Bob Odenkirk was going to be the lead in an action movie, especially an action movie like this, and then you find out that it's being done by the John Wick guys, you're like, okay, this movie is going to be interesting. And when you watch it, you ain't disappointed whatsoever. You're really not disappointed whatsoever. Bob Odenkirk as the character of Hutch Menzel is awesome. He does a fantastic job at making Hutch feel like this everyday mundane guy, just going through the motions every day of the week with his routine lifestyle. Until, everything that happens with his house getting broken into, and this is when the flip switch and Hutch pretty much becomes an action hero and does not disappoint. Bob Odenkirk did a fantastic job at balancing out the mundane life of Hutch and the action star, life of Hutch, especially when the movie reveals that Hutch used to be a CIA operative and worked as an auditor, and he was trying to kill a target, but he let that target go, and then years later he saw that target start a family of his own, and this is what inspired Hutch to want to do the same thing. The only thing is that after a while Hutch started to become too assimilated to this life, and he was starting to lose, and he was just starting to feel just plain average and every day, and pretty much started to become a pushover. But he also said that he had a couple of good years in between that before his life started to go down the route of a typical life where everything is just by the motions and average. And like I said, Odenkirk does a fantastic job all throughout this movie at the portrayal of Hutch, perfectly balancing out the family man side of Hutch and the action side of Hutch very, very perfectly. Odenkirk is also, backed by a very disappointing cast. You got Connie Nelson, Christopher Lloyd, RZA, Colin Solomon, and I thought all these guys did really good in their role. Connie Nelson plays the wife, and I like the chemistry between Nelson and Odenkirk. I like how their marriage is very distant and just very by the numbers, but as the film progresses, the spark starts to come back a little bit, and I enjoyed that. I liked it a lot. It wasn't like a typical movie marriage where the wife and husband are like, oh, you gotta do this and that. It's more along the lines of, listen, do this, and we'll talk about it later. And she's just like, okay. That was refreshing. That was refreshing to see. I like the relationship that he has with his kids. I thought that was well done as well, especially his son, since the son tried to help out when the house got broken into. Hutch did nothing, and the son is like, Dad, what the fuck? Pretty much. So I like how he has a distant relationship with his son, and I like how the relationship with his daughter is a little bit more closer when you actually watch the movie. Like, he's more closer with his little daughter than he is his son, which is the catalyst that gets, you know, Hush's motivations up and running. So, you know, I enjoyed that stuff. I like that stuff. I thought that was well done. Christopher Lloyd, who played the dad named David, you know, at first I wasn't too keen on what they were doing with Christopher Lloyd's character, mainly because he's just portrayed as a vegetable, and he and Odenkirk don't get a chance to share enough scenes together. But when you get to the third act, it makes up for it in spades. Same with the character of Rizza, who played Harry, Hutch's brother. You know, at first he's just talking through Hutch through the radio and through phone, and we don't really get to see no face-to-face interactions with the two characters until you get to the third act, and then again makes up for it, just like the character of David. And I'll get to the third act in a second. So yeah, like the overall utilizations of Lloyd and Rizza, mixed bag. At first, mixed bag at the best, but it does pay off at the end. And the end of this movie is excessively glorious. So yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that. Colin Solomon plays a character called the Barber. The Barber is kind of like the character of Winston in the Continental from the John Wick franchise. He's like the information guy in a way. And I like seeing Colin Solomon in this movie. It really sets up that he and Hutch have a built-in relationship, which I like. And it can lead for more stories to be told with these two. And you can really make the Barber the Winston character of the Nobody universe if Nobody develops into a universe of its own, a la the John Wick films. You know, the Barber could be a pretty interesting character. But in the one scene that he was in, potential, you did a great job of building up a history, and I would like to see more. We'd really like to see more. In terms of the villains, Derek Colston has an obsession with the Russian mafia, because once again, you know, he has a hero who's going up against, you know, the Russian mob in a way, after pretty much Hutch locks himself in a bus trying to save a girl from sexual harassment. He beats up a bunch of thugs. One of the thugs happens to be the brother of a prominent Russian mafia dude, and this is what sets off the Russian mob to go after Hutch. You know, it's like a rehash of John Wick in a way. The only thing is that when the Russian mob went after John Wick in John Wick 1, you felt that there was a connection between the mob boss and John Wick because they have a history with one another, and it was actually more interesting. This movie, not so much. The Russian mob just came across as just like this big threat that Hutch needed to overcome. And I don't know, to me it just felt forced a little bit. And not only that, the lead villain, Lulian, I think his name, I don't know, he just didn't have the same charisma as the villain from the first John Wick movie. I mean, the performance wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just didn't find the character to be all that interesting. That's just me personally. But I will say this, the action sequences in this movie are downright awesome. They're bloody, they feel like they're grounded and realistic. When Hutch takes a beating, the man takes a fucking beating. Like, this guy gets a bloody nose, he gets stabbed, and you can feel the pain that he feels when he's getting his ass handed to him. And you can also feel the pain of the other guys when Hutch fights back, and he fights back in a big way. Like, the bus sequence is one of the best set pieces in this entire movie. Everything in between that is just like typical shoot 'em ups, but very, very well done, very well done and well choreographed. Until you get to the third act, where you have Hutch, his dad, and his brother all teaming up in a warehouse, and they just go on a gloriously entertaining rampage, setting up booby traps and everything like that, bombs. It's awesome. The third act of this movie is awesome. Christopher Lloyd, you know, we find out that, you know, he was kind of faking his catatonic state in the nursing home since he's already a retired FBI agent. You know, he joins the fun along with his two sons, and the three of them were awesome in the third act. And their bantering back and forth throughout the third act was really entertaining, and I would love to see a movie just centered around these three. I think Lloyd, Rizza, and Odenkirk as a trio could make for a damn fun group of guys going on missions, taking down bad guys. Like, the potential is there for something awesome. And the third act of this movie is really awesome. And I also like this thing at the end where we do get set up for a sequel with Rizza and Lloyd kind of road trip. So yeah, potential for awesomeness when it comes to Nobody. And I do like how the movie is framed, how we see, you know, Hutch being interrogated. He tells a story to the cops, and then we go back around to that happening, and we go back around to wrapping that up, where he pretty much calls himself Nobody, which is going to be his action name. So yeah, despite some flaws that I had with Nobody, this is still a very damn good action movie. It is so entertaining. It's so refreshing to watch. It is so just refreshing watching an action movie that is just an action movie. It doesn't have no grand political statements to make. It doesn't, you know, care that it's excessively violent or anything like that. It's merely meant to entertain, and that's what Nobody is. An entertaining popcorn action movie of the late 80s and 90s, only now done with a 2021 perspective. And with all that being said, I give this film a solid 8 out of 10. Those are my thoughts on Nobody. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.